Montgomery Planning and staff for joining us for this important presentation. And I see that our town manager is online and our council president, Robin Barr, council member Rohit Khanna. And I will turn it over to Tara Margulies to introduce herself and the staff, and then we can begin. And thank you again so much.
Our pleasure. So my name is Tara Margulies, and I'm a master planner in the West County Division of Montgomery Planning, and I'm the project lead for the Friendship Heights Sector Plan. Larissa, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Larissa Clevin. I'm the master plan supervisor for West County.
And Audrey?
Audrey?
Hi there. I'm Audrey Vogel. I'm another master planner on the West County team.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen now. So what we're going to do is give basically sort of a where we are with the plan now sort of update. It's not too long, so there'll be time for us to ask questions and talk about what's coming next, etc. So we'll just briefly, even though I think people here are aware, just review like what's the sector plan, why we're doing it, and we're going to talk about the community engagement we've done, where we are with the plan in general, and then we'll talk really briefly about the questionnaire we sent out just to the town of Somerset. It had some brief questions about how people in Somerset get to and from Friendship Heights and what they come to Friendship Heights for. So I'll summarize that and then tell you guys what comes next in the plan. So I think this is stuff we can skip over. I think people here are pretty familiar, but sector plan, we're doing a sector plan update. Sector plans and master plans in Montgomery County are the same thing, just sector plans are typically smaller and more well-defined. And so when we plan the downtowns in the county, it's a sector plan. We talk about land use and zoning, urban design, transportation, housing, parks, the economy, the environment. If there are historic resources, we talk about those too in a plan. We also look at how the final proposed plan vision, when we get there, how that will impact MCPS and the schools. And this is like a template for every master and sector plan. And then of course we expand or contract these sections based on the specific area that we're planning. So I know you guys are familiar with this, but just to recap, this is the plan boundary for the Friendship Heights sector plan. Everything inside the black dashed line is the plan area, and all the recommendations we write will be about things in the plan area. We cannot write recommendations about things outside the plan area in the final plan. Our process is a multi-year process, and we are just past our like 1 year mark with this plan, and we're at the tail end, really, or I would say we're at the tail end of this phase. We are working on a summary now of all of the engagement we've done over the last year, because we're finished with our visioning phase, which we just closed on October 17th. And we are already starting to work on preliminary recommendations in terms of things the staff is already working on. And I'll talk about the schedule in a minute. But after we do put together some preliminary recommendations, we'll bring those to the community and to the board for a briefing. The next thing that happens is we really start working on the draft plan, and that will take all the way probably through the late spring, early summer of next year. And then we'll have a draft of the plan. There'll be a public hearing where we can accept formal comment from anybody who wants to come give it. And then the planning board will work with the planning staff in its usual public meeting process to revise the plan and take into account community considerations and planning board considerations. And once we have that draft in place, we send it over to the county council. That won't happen until the beginning of 2027 because it's a council election year. And then the council reviews, the executive also reviews, and there's another public hearing and more opportunities for comment. And then by the time this plan gets approved and adopted, it'll probably be spring 2027 or thereabouts. So that's how this fits into our schedule. I only take it here through us transmitting to the council because they really set the schedule after they receive it, but it follows what I just said. We're here wrapping up this part and soon to jump into the first stage of our plan development. So what have we done so far? The next few parts of this presentation are going to talk about what have we been doing for this year. So a lot of what we've been doing and what we always do for the first year of a plan is engagement. We started off in the fall of last year, actually in November, And we have sort of 5 goals overall with our engagement. So we want to reach as wide of a range of stakeholders as possible. Stakeholders for a plan like this, it's not just people who live in the plan area, obviously, like the town of Somerset, people who live around the plan area, people who work in Friendship Heights, people who come there to go to the doctor, all kinds of groups of people that are engaged in some level or another with Friendship Heights. We want to make sure we're being clear and straightforward with what we say to people. We want to provide a variety of opportunities so people can participate no matter where they are in life. We're working hard to collaborate with the many community partners and agencies in and around Friendship Heights, and we try and meet people where they are, which means that while we will hold our own meetings, we will come to all of your meetings, or however many times people want us to. We'll come out to their meeting, their event, their space, and talk to them. So here's a list of all the groups we've spoken to so far. You guys are up there at the beginning because we talked to you in the beginning of this, and obviously many of these groups we've met with more than once at this point, and we continue to grow the list as we move through the plan. So after we did that initial engagement, we moved into what we call the existing conditions analysis. So after you get the scope of work approved at the board, which is sort of like the first milestone of any plan, before we do any more thinking about the future of this place, we have to understand what's here today. So we did an extensive existing conditions analysis. And of course, the team is a lot bigger than me and Larissa and Audrey. We've got 10 other planners on this team, and many of them are experts in these topics you see here. And so we compiled a lot of data on all these topics. We presented that to the community and to the planning board. The presentation is still on our website. And this gives us a really good baseline understanding of what Friendship Heights is like today with regard to all of these topics, because these are topics that we generally look at to make recommendations about in a plan. And then the next thing we do after finishing up existing conditions analysis is then we feel prepared to start a really intense engagement process called visioning. So visioning is really where we spend all of our time, working on how to meet different people in the community, really expand that stakeholder base, and talk to the community about developing a vision for the future of Friendship Heights. We did a whole bunch of things in visioning. We ran workshops in the spring, back in June. When we started this, we had an in-person workshop and a virtual workshop. Then we did focus groups over the summer for people that we had not really met in those initial visioning workshops and who we hadn't met yet in the pre-scope engagement, which meant we did focus groups for business owners in Friendship Heights, a very important perspective for a plan. We did focus groups for renters. A lot of times it's hard to get the renters to come to stuff because they don't always feel like they're as invested. But we reached out to rental properties specifically, and we ended up talking to quite a few folks. And that's really helpful because it's great to understand why people are renting in Friendship Heights. Do they want to stay here, et cetera, et cetera. And we also did 2 focus groups for parents of kids 18 and under. We know this is a busy group and they often cannot come to our regular events, but we were able to add a whole lot of them to our e-letter list and talk to about 15 parents in 2 focus groups, which really helped us get a handle on what the concerns are for families in Friendship Heights. Then we had a really large questionnaire that went out to everyone on our e-letter list, and we did a questionnaire just for Somerset and Chevy Chase Village. They were a little different, but they asked similar questions because we really wanted to figure out why we weren't getting a lot of participants from those 2 neighboring communities, and I'll share the results of the Somerset one in a minute. And then we did a fall workshop. I see Commissioner Khanna is having a really hard time staying in the meeting. I'll just pause for a second. Councilmember Khanna, are you in the meeting? Can you hear us?
I am. Thank you.
Okay, I see that you keep popping out. If you need, there is like a phone number we can give you that might, if you keep getting kicked out from Teams, which can be very unreliable at times. I can give you like a number that you can call to get into the meeting on your phone if it happens again.
Okay, thank you.
So the last thing we did was a workshop that was kind of in 2 parts. We did, and this is a picture from the fall workshop. In September, we had an in-person one where we sat around tables and talked about sites that followed a presentation on master plan implementation. And then instead of holding a virtual version of that, which is what we typically have done, we decided to set up a web-based interactive but asynchronous version of that where you could watch the presentation see the materials, answer questions, same questions we asked in the workshop. And we left that on our website up for 2 weeks, and we got 174 responses. So that was a lot more people than we ever would have gotten to come to a virtual meeting on one night at one time. So that was pretty successful. And that was the same material and same discussion questions at the fall workshop and the web-based visioning. So we got a lot of feedback on the stuff we talked about then. And that was really where we started talking about specific sites. We talked about Geico. We talked about Saks and the collection along Wisconsin. And we talked about 5550 Friendship Boulevard, a site that's in the village that has an office building on it. And we really got into sort of more like almost practical conversations about what people can see on these sites. And so now that we've finished all of these visioning exercises, now we are looking through all those responses. Our engagement consultant, Brick and Story, is creating a summary report for us, but we are also just looking through the material so that we can really get our head around all the things we've heard. We had, 500 and something questionnaire responses. So that's a lot of responses to read through. We left room for people to write stuff. So there's a lot to read. So we're just getting through that now. And hopefully the next few weeks, we're going to be able to come forward with a presentation that summarizes what we've heard. And we will bring that also to the community, and we'll just post it on our website. It'll just be a webinar. And then we will use Zoom for that. I promise, we always do. For webinars, we can do it. And then we also will probably present that briefing to the board around the same time, just so we can give back the community who participated. People spent a lot of time with us, a snapshot of, okay, what did we hear? If we look at what we heard from all the 1,000 people that we spoke to, which can be really helpful when we start moving into proposals for recommendations, is to say, well, we heard this, so in response to that, we're proposing this. So that's one of the next things that will happen. These are just some photos from the workshops we had back in June. We had sort of a What'll Friendship Heights Be in 20 Years board. We had people looking at Wisconsin Avenue. We can talk about this. And here's a nice picture from our fall workshop where you can see people putting sticky notes. We talked about how to implement sector plans and how plans are realized, and also the relationship between development and amenities. So amenities has been a really big conversation in this plan. We really wanted to get to talk about that with people in person in a group. And I think it was pretty successful. So the last few slides is just looking at in this tiny, zooming in the visioning to this questionnaire that we sent to the town of Somerset. This was really almost like a pulse survey, as they call it, right? To say, do people in Somerset know this plan is going on? Over time, we have sent updates, to the town manager saying, can we put this in the newsletter or whatever? But we know that doesn't mean everybody's paying attention, and we get that. So we made this questionnaire just to try and say, do you know this is going on?
And we greatly appreciate that. And I think it was in response to one of our first meetings that we were concerned about it. So thank you so much for doing that.
Sure. And, there was like 2 goals of this short questionnaire. It was very short because we wanted people to finish it. And it was, do you know the sector plan's going on? If you do know, have you participated? And then we sort of asked, like, how often do you go into Friendship Heights and how do you get there? Because those are some of the important things we're trying to understand about the border between Friendship Heights and the neighboring communities. And then we said, if you haven't heard about the plan, you can sign up for our e-letter. So, and we did this in the summer. So we hope, and I will say, in the broader questionnaire, we're just getting through the demographic data, so I don't have the takeaway yet. But there were people who participated from the town of Somerset, I know, and it's more than we saw before. So I think this did at least help the people who responded to this. At least some of those people said, okay, I'm interested. I'm going to sign up for the e-newsletter from the plan. So we had 84 people respond, and most of them had not heard about the sector plan before, so I felt good that we did this, so people now know about it, which was important. Of the people who responded, so more than 60% of the respondents said they go to Friendship Heights at least once a week. And of the people who go, and then we ask them, okay, if you go, what do you go to? Unsurprisingly for us, but it's always good to get confirmation, most people are going to the doctor or Whole Foods, which, as we have seen through our engagement broadly, are the 2 most popular reasons people come to Friendship Heights. Although restaurant was close behind, and then everything else falls off, which much less respondents going to that. I will say, when we talked to Chevy Chase Village, it was basically the same, in the sense they had a higher percentage of people coming into Friendship Heights at least once a week, but they were going to the same 2 destinations, effectively, the doctor or Whole Foods. Whole Foods is really the biggest draw. second to the medical buildings in Friendship Heights at this moment. So this is totally consistent with what we've heard so far. And we want to know how people go. And we specifically want to know if people are using that trail connection that goes through the park behind Friendship Heights that connects to the pool. I'm mostly curious because I see people use it, but it's obviously not super accessible in a lot of ways. So wasn't sure if everyone's using it or people are going other ways. And we had a good number of people. You know, obviously everyone walks. We asked this question, but we expected to see everyone walk. Some people do move their car. You know, nobody else is, there's not a lot of other ways to come. But we did see a good split between people using the trail. Slightly more people use the trail, but a lot of people walking down Wisconsin. So that was just good to see that people are using the trail, but it's not like the overwhelming favorite of a way to walk. And I'm sure it depends where you live in Somerset, et cetera, but something we just
Right,
wanted to get a
because
handle on.
right, because we named that the Marnie Shaw Path, and that's not, you know, Dorset Avenue is also a way to get to Friendship Heights, as is out of the River Road entrance and walking down the sidewalk.
Yes, the river. Well, that was sort of
Yeah.
other people wrote about river as
Yeah.
another way that people come
Yeah.
down. And yeah, I mean, look, we've observed people using the trail, but I wanted to get a sense of, you know, are most people going to say they use it? But it
Oh, I
was a
see
good
on here.
split.
Yeah, I see. You.
So just trying to understand how many people are using the trail, just to get a sense. And so it seems like it's pretty well used. And there were some people wrote in some comments. We had people write some comments. Nothing earth shattering. Mostly people saying like, "Oh, I use the trail. I use it at night," which is what I would expect. Things like that. So that's what we heard. I was glad we did it because I think we got, you know, some 70 people to learn about the plan who didn't know about it from before. So I think that was definitely a positive outcome. Our next steps, like I said, is working on this visioning summary. I'm hoping it's going to be before Thanksgiving, but if not, it'll be right after. So it's coming up in the near term. And then the team is starting to work on preliminary recommendations once we have finalized the summary for the visioning. That is probably not going to be something that we have ready until the first quarter of the new year. Because once we head into the holidays, you know, things slow down a bit. So I would say sometime in the first quarter of the new year, we'll have preliminary recommendations. And that's like a first look at some of the big ideas that we would expect to put in the plan. And we bring that to the community so people can hear that, give us some feedback, ask questions, and then we will take it to the planning board really for the same reason. Their planning board doesn't take any action on preliminary recommendations. It's just us saying, okay, here's where we're heading. How do you guys all feel about this? Right direction? What are we missing? Things like that. So that's the next step that will come. And everybody here, I think, has my contact info, but there it is. So that's my update.
Okay, so thank you. Council President Barr, do you have any questions?
Well, it's a question I asked before. It's just a question, was there any results from it, which is, are you coordinating with the DC planning folks who are obviously responsible for the other Friendship Heights, the ones
Correct. Across
Western Avenue?
Yeah, we certainly are. We meet with the DC Office of Planning every month. Actually, we've been meeting with them every month for years. We meet with the planners who are responsible for the areas that border Montgomery County. And those of us who plan the areas in Montgomery County that border DC meet with those DC planners every month. And right now, you know, Friendship Heights is the subject at hand. We followed very closely their Wisconsin Avenue Development Framework Plan, which they completed almost 2 years ago now, I guess a year and a half ago, for that. And that takes, you know, Wisconsin all the way down to Tenleytown. And we're really just focused on those first few blocks, but it's great to understand the context. And so when we, you know, in that sense, we take what they've recommended as what might be our future context, right? When we think about Friendship Heights in 20 years on our side, we are imagining that some of what they're visioning for that side of Friendship Heights will help come to fruition on that side. We also make sure we stay in touch regularly with WMATA because they have a lot of stuff going on both sides of the border, including the Lord and Taylor site, for example. So we try and keep up to date on whatever is happening on the DC side of Friendship Heights so we can keep all of that in mind. I don't know. I don't know how much this comes up in Somerset, but, you know, where we hear a lot. We do get sometimes past, you know, we have a lot of Friendship Heights residents who have a lot of comments about what's going on in DC, because for some people it's literally across the street, and we know the right people, and we've been passing those on. to the planners and the transportation folk on that side
So
who
you
are
are taking
responsible for some of it.
into account the development that's happening in Friendship Heights in
Yes.
terms of, yeah.
Yep.
Because there is
Yep.
quite a bit happening, as you know.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things on the boards, and they're going through, their process is so different than ours. So they do a plan, and then their zoning process is like totally separate. So they're going through that zoning rewrite process now based on the recommendations that were in the Wisconsin Avenue Development Framework Plan, and we're getting monthly updates on that from the DC staff.
Okay, good. All right.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Khan, do you have any questions?
Thank you very much, Atara. And I attended the September 30th session you had, and also sent you a follow-up email.
Yeah.
And first of all, I want to thank you very much. I mean, I think that September 30th session was really good, and it was a great way for community members to sort of brainstorm and contribute. I think for me, there are sort of, I would say, three fundamental points I'd like to make, and that I'd just like to hear your thoughts on as you go through this process. The first is, I'd like to sort of understand better from you and your colleagues as the professionals, why is it that Friendship Heights is not a vibrant place? That food hall shut down and so on and so forth. I mean, it can't just be that needs to be more housing, because it's a pretty dense area to begin with, and reasonably high income residents. Why are people driving to Bethesda rather than walking to Friendship Heights? So as urban planners, what is it? What's missing over there? I'm not an expert in this area, but I would be keen to hear from you sort of what makes these kinds of areas vibrant, and what kind of change you think would be needed to do that. The second thing I just want to say is, I mean, I really would like
Let's
to
have
see.
her answer.
Okay, just
Councilmember
wanted to
Khan,
answer
let's
that
have her
first, yeah.
answer. Let's have
Yeah,
them answer
okay.
that. Yeah.
Sure.
So I think there's a few things broadly that we can talk about when we talk about Friendship Heights as compared to. So first of all, I would say simply there's a matter of scale. Friendship Heights is a fraction of the size of a downtown like Bethesda. So Bethesda can offer multiple things. And yes, they've developed some very specific places to draw people, but even if you zoom out from that, they have multiple retail corridors. They have different kinds of neighborhoods. So you're going to find different kinds of open spaces, and you're going to find different kinds of shopping experiences, and therefore you're going to find different kinds of restaurants. So when you have a larger area, you have the ability to develop multiple layers of like a local economy and multiple reasons for people to come. Friendship Heights, when it started, basically became a regional retail destination for department stores. That was it. It was a one-hit wonder in that way. It was a residential neighborhood, a unique zoning change that somebody took really good notice of, allowed people to sell their houses and profit, and apartments to go up overnight. And then basically Woodward and Lothrop, which of course was the big DC department store in the 50s, said, you know what, people are moving this way, the streetcar is going this way, we're going to put a department store there. They were inspired by Hecht's, which put their department store in downtown Silver Spring in 1947. And that was it. Other department stores followed, and for 2 decades or 3 decades even, people came to Friendship Heights basically to shop. Department stores is where it was at. That was where everybody went. Those places were a big draw. Even though it was sort of controversial for Saks to come there, they came because the other department stores were there. And this was a department store, if you can go to 3 department stores in one intersection, and then a mall opens across the street, like this is now a shopping mecca. The challenge is that then that type of shopping went out of favor. And why that change is not really about Friendship Heights. That's about, all kinds of different things that went into a shopping experience, the desire, sort of indoor malls went out of favor. The advent of online retailers. I mean, the the retail decline in Friendship Heights started way before COVID. COVID just sort of kind of gave it the nail in the coffin. But if you look at the data, and we've looked at all this, it started in the early 2000s, and then it started to go down and down until it hit the 2010s. So you have a place that doesn't have all those layers. It had a lot of people living there, and it had a lot of department stores and a mall, 2 malls really. If you go to the DC side, right, and you combine that intersection in one, and then all of a sudden it loses its major identity, and there isn't a second thing to help it keep it going. And then people stop coming. When people stop coming, things close, and then you have this, and then COVID did not help at all. And now you have a place that still has a lot of people living there. It has 2 department stores that are not very well, visited. And then now one mall just turned into an apartment building. And while the other one still has some mixed use stuff going in there and the Trader Joe's will help, we are not a regional retail destination anymore. And the challenge is that Friendship Heights had that was the thing going for it. And so when you look at a downtown like Bethesda, you have a lot of smaller things that all put together to make a more interesting whole. And unfortunately, Friendship Heights just developed in a kind of an unusual way. And so part of the challenge is figuring out, what brings people here now is literally the doctor. That is the growing sector here. That is something to capitalize on. It is not necessarily a bad thing, but it is a big shift. So that is one reason. And the other reason is that, Bethesda's retail environment, again, it's bigger, it's more diverse, it's more robust, and they were able to shift and keep up with the times. So they have Bethesda Row, which is much more the way people want to shop now. Friendship Heights was not like nimble and robust enough to pivot and come up with something like that. Is there the potential for that in the future? There probably is, but you're never going to get the diversity of retail in Friendship Heights because you're still going to have one corridor. You're just going to have Wisconsin. That's what you have. It's just so much smaller. And so I think those are sort of, I think, 2 of the big factors that have made it challenging. I think one of the things that the plan is looking for is what can be a new identity for Friendship Heights. Right now, Friendship Heights is the place where the malls and the department stores used to be. So we would like to not have the identity of Friendship Heights be something that is comparing it to how it was 20 years ago. Trying to come up with an identity for Friendship Heights that's forward-looking, that can create something here. It's going to be on a lesser scale, but something that makes people say, oh, Friendship Heights is not Bethesda, but it's its own thing, and we want to go there for the specialness, for the uniqueness that is this smaller downtown that has its own special character. That's where, if we can, over the next 20 years, get to a place like that, that will be amazing. And there are several, very large opportunity sites in Friendship Heights where, you just need one. You can get one really good development, could be a catalyst for that kind of thing. And we see that in different sort of small pockets around the county. So, people always want to compare it to Bethesda, but if you look at a map, you are talking about like a neighborhood of Bethesda size. So it's hard to compare. I think it's sort of apples and oranges. I hope that answers your question and that makes sense. There's lots of other things to talk about, but I think those are the big
I
things.
appreciate that basically the retail sector changed under the feet of Friendship Heights.
Yes.
And I think that the challenge for you will be to identify that one thing, or maybe the 2 things that Friendship Heights can get a new identity. I mean, I in my email to you, I'd given it 1 or 2 suggestions on what what we're missing in Montgomery County might be something that could go in those opportunity sites. But I don't want to sort of go into the detail here. But I think the second thing I wanted to just ask you about is Geico. So I read recently that that the proposal now is to no longer have any commercial buildings on the current Geico site. All of it would become residential. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes and no. So I'll say this briefly because we're the master planning team and not the regulatory team. And unfortunately, usually our chief is here with us who covers both, but he is out sick this week. So what happened at the planning board 2 weeks ago was that they approved an amendment to a plan from 20 years ago that was already approved, that was still valid. And so basically it amended the plan and gave it a new validity period. Geico, as we know, which is public knowledge, is trying to sell the property. better to sell property with an approved entitlement on the property than not. And because it would be hard to sell the property with an entitlement that said you have to build commercial space right now in this market, they have removed the commercial space from this current plan that was approved. However, they have not publicly announced a development partner yet, and the planning board and the staff made it clear that this is so that they can continue moving forward with their process to find a development partner. Once they find one, they'll have to come back and redo this plan that they just showed the planning board. There's 2 more steps left till they could get it approved to go through and start, actually doing anything. And so yes, right now, what's approved on the site does not involve any commercial. We have no idea what, when a development partner shows up and agrees to buy the site, they're probably going to have their own vision of what they want there. In today's market, I would imagine we're still not going to see a lot of new commercial space. Generally in Montgomery County, we're dealing with what to do with all of our empty commercial space. It's not just it's a regional issue, I would say.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
but it doesn't mean, in the long-term view of that property, that plan does not necessarily dictate what will happen in the long term, is the short answer.
Okay. And the last point I just wanted to make is, I know you heard this at least at the table I was at on September 30th, but I just want to reiterate it. There's quite a bit of greenery there around the Geico site. I really hope that in your vision for Friendship Heights, you will try to keep Friendship Heights as green as possible. I know that there's a lot of emphasis on density and so on in the planning world, but I feel that I'm extremely concerned about stormwater, about heat island effect, about the need to have green and open space for children. I think sort of an amenity-rich Friendship Heights should be part of the vision, and not to have every square inch covered in apartment buildings and its surrounding parking or whatever. So I really hope that you will find a way to ensure that at the end of the day, the only thing left will be Vinton Park on the Somerset side over there, facing Friendship Heights, and of course I know Brookdale has a little park there, which, as I understand it, the county will take over. I think, but I hope it'll be more than that. There's that vision. I think it's important for Friendship Heights to have a good amount of greenery as well. Thank you.
Yes, that's a value for us as well. We have a parks planner on every team and an environmental planner on every team, and they're very focused on improving the green space network in the plan.
Okay, well,
Thank you.
I have 3 little quick questions before we go. The first one, which I'm bringing up again, is the possibility somewhere along this timeline that the town of Somerset boundary, the boundary for the sector, for the area, can be expanded to include all of our town so that it can be overlaid as single family only. So that's still something that the council could do by the spring of 2027, correct?
Well, once we have a scope of work and a boundary set, there's not typically a mechanism to change the boundary of the plan in a significant way.
Unless we begin to start heavily lobbying, right? Because it
even
is up
so,
to
it has happened occasionally that they have made a tweak in the boundary, but it's not typical that they would change the boundary significantly.
So you think it's hopeless?
You guys are free to speak to the council about whatever you want.
Okay, excellent. I'm
And
glad
I
to
was
hear.
just also building on what
I'm
Atara
taking
was
that.
saying.
I understand that you're just the planners. You don't make the final vote, and so it can still be a political issue. And thank you so much for that. The second
Can I
is.
build on what Atara was saying for a moment?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah,
that
of course.
I think what we've seen in the past is that if a boundary is changed at a later date, it's usually to make it smaller rather than larger. you know, I
Okay.
think the council will be unlikely, I think, to want to include a neighborhood that has not been involved in all of these discussions that we've been having. We do so much work to get the community involved and have their voices heard and represented within the plan, that
Right.
to add an area where that kind of years of work and effort and relationship building and community
Right.
engagement has happened, I think is, obviously the council will do what it wants to do at the end of the day, but I just want to stress that
Yeah.
I think it's not something that, you know, we would really encourage at this stage.
I
Also,
understand.
I will add, just Mayor Slavin, that
Yeah.
there are also all these analyses that go into the plan. There's an environmental one, a very extensive transportation one. So that's why typically any tweaks to boundary have been excluding one property, two properties, because the analysis has already been done. You would have to put an entirely new plan, start from the beginning. If you were going to change it like that, there's not really a precedent that I'm aware of where they have
Okay.
made that sort of change. I mean, I think there are opportunities in the future to look at other plans in the Bethesda Chevy Chase area, which is something that our
Okay.
team is tasked with.
Okay.
But I think there's not, like Clarissa is saying, that the changes that have happened, you know, in the last decade of planning is to remove a property or a handful of properties for a particular, very specific
Well, maybe,
reason.
maybe a handful of properties can be, but anyway, you know,
But
you're giving the answer that you're supposed to give as a staff person analyzing it, but it's really more of a political question. And so, so thank you for your response. My next question is, you know, I'm sure everybody in this call, well, the three of us elected officials, we all filled out that lovely survey. And I know there was a deadline on it. And is there any way you would could do another survey for our town? And specifically, what I was thinking is, I, one of the things that I wrote in mine is that in terms of my vision for Friendship Heights, which has been said over and over again for decades, is there's no 24-hour drugstore there. There's no 7-Eleven there. There's no hardware store there. So is there any way that another survey could be done for our town that said, you know, would you be interested in a hardware store? Would you be interested in a drugstore? So, and because a drugstore goes hand in hand with, you know, and this is something that I had a discussion with Councilor Khan about this. He's the one that enlightened me about how this is becoming a medical destination. And maybe that is one of the future things. But anyway, is there any way that you can do another survey of our town or at some point?
So let
so
me jump in there for a second. So we
Yeah.
can do another survey, but I want to kind of caveat it with the idea that the
Okay.
master plan is a long-term vision. And when we look at zoning categories, we aren't going to be able to say on this property, you know, we want this use versus that use. We look at larger categories within the code to
Okay.
allow market
Okay.
conditions and future flexibility. So we're not going to make recommendations that's, you know, we want this type of restaurant versus that one, or we want
Okay.
a hardware store versus, you know, a bookstore. Like that kind of level
I
of
understand. Oh
detail
yeah,
is
bookstore is
not,
another one. Yeah.
but
Okay,
it's just
good.
not the level of detail
Right.
that the plan or the code will address.
And I think also to your point, we got a lot of Somerset residents who responded to our major questionnaire, which did include a question about amenities. And actually, a pharmacy with extended hours is one of the top 3 things that all 500 that came out of that questionnaire.
Oh, excellent. Glad to
And
hear that.
the very, very large amenities like that, like a CVS or a grocery store or an art center, or those are things that people voted for. Those are the kind of amenities that the sector plan can broadly say, this would be a positive thing for this community. And that's sort of where it stops. And then in the future, sometimes a developer will come in, and because they need to show that they're doing something that follows the sector plan, and they're looking for what big anchor tenant they can put in the bottom of their new building, sometimes that's how you'll end up with the CVS, because they will say, oh, everybody really wanted a pharmacy. Let me see if I can get Walgreens or CVS to come back to this neighborhood. But
Okay,
the sector plan
excellent.
kind of stops there. It cannot, like Larissa said, it cannot say,
Okay.
you know, we need a hardware store in this.
Okay.
Hardware store did come up in there. So I think we've covered a lot of that in the amenities
Okay,
survey
excellent.
that we've done.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so thank you again. I was very pleased that so many people from our town actually responded to the survey. And I think what would be good, if I'm not sure if we should have our staff write some kind of article about this report, or if your staff could write like a 3 or 4 paragraph summary of what we talked about today, because, every municipality has a challenge in communicating information to our residents. And one of the tools we have is our town journal, which I don't think is widely read, and we also have, we're on all the social media, and everybody has their own way of getting information. So if there's a way you could do some kind of brief report that we could circulate, that'd be wonderful. And my last thing is that I personally think that if you created like 4 or 5 dog parks in Friendship Heights, that would make it a huge destination for lots of people in this part of the county. Just like downtown Bethesda is known for its restaurants, and maybe Friendship Heights' future would be known for its dog parks. And that's all. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, we've definitely heard a lot about dog parks in Friendship
Have you?
Heights,
Oh,
so
good. Glad to
yes.
hear that.
Yes, we have.
Glad to hear
So
that.
that
Okay.
has been a hot topic for quite a
Okay.
while.
Wonderful. Well, again,
I'm sure not all positive though.
Both sides.
oh, of
I mean,
course.
they're
But if it's, but
on
if
all
it's,
sides. Actually,
if the dog parks are created with some kind of sound barriers so that the neighbors can't hear the dogs barking, it would work out beautifully. And there's new technology for all that. So, but anyway, thank you again. We really appreciate it, and we will be seeing you again soon.
sure. And if you guys would like us to come make a public presentation of any sort, just get in touch and
Yes,
we'll talk about that.
we definitely do, and we appreciate your ability to do that.
Sure.
So
Thank you
thanks
very
a
much for
lot.
your
Our
time.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you again.
Thanks so much for
Okay,
having
take care.
us.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care. Okay, bye-bye.